Welcome to Modern Man Academy. This channel is devoted to helping young men around the world become the best versions of themselves. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the world of work. It's a vast topic, and the issues I'm addressing in this video, you really must understand. If you already know what I'm about to share, that's great. But in my experience, the majority of young men have never had anyone actually explain it to them. If you've never been told what I'm going to share with you, you could end up getting fired without even knowing why you're being fired. I'm going to talk about what every employer demands from those who work for them. There's a lot for me to cover, and please watch it all. Do it in chunks if necessary. Think about what you hear to come up with your own conclusions, and I hope it helps. If you like what I talk about in this video, please like and subscribe to this channel. It helps me grow it. And if there are topics you'd like me to cover in the future, please write them in the comment section below. I read them all. The best comments could be turned into new videos. And please share these videos with other guys you know who might find them interesting. If you find this content particularly helpful, you can always buy me a coffee. There's a link in the description below. In early 2024, the Oscar-winning actress and filmmaker Jodie Foster was quoted as saying this about Gen Z. They're really annoying, especially in the workplace. They're like, nah, I'm not feeling it today. I'm going to come in at 10:30 a.m. Or in emails, I'll tell them this is all grammatically incorrect. Did you not check your spelling? And they're like, why would I do that? Isn't that kind of limiting? Even though she's a very well-known and highly respected person in the film industry for going out of her way to help the careers of young actors and filmmakers, she got a lot of crap thrown at her for saying that. What do you think? Now, staying with Hollywood, by all accounts, a really good guy. And one of his many movies is called News of the World. It's set in small town America in the 1800s. His co-star was a young German actress called Helene Zengel. She'd done some brilliant work. In one interview promoting the movie, she said that Tom Hanks had given her 3 bits of helpful career advice. 1. Show up on time. This is so incredibly important. Even if you have a rather fluid relationship to time. Just because you might not think it's important, it doesn't mean you're right. If you're due to start work at 9 a.m., be there ready to start working at 5 before 9, never 5 after 9 or later. This simple thing will be noticed by your bosses, and in a good way. 2, his second piece of advice was know your lines. Obviously this relates to acting, but it can be applied in all jobs. Know why you're there and be fully prepared for what you need to do or what is expected of you. His third piece of advice is also so important. Simply be nice. Be an agreeable person to work with. Always. It can be difficult when you're stressed or tired to snap at colleagues. Don't do it. Ever. I presented news on BBC TV for a long time, and early in my TV career, one of my bosses told me that all the technicians on the crew were there to make me look and sound as good as possible. So never mistreat them. I pride myself on living by this rule for decades. But in one of my other videos, I share one particular incident in my own career where I verbally lashed out at a colleague, and it came back to haunt me in a big way a few years later. If you decide to follow all 3 of those Tom Hanks pieces of advice, you'll start to develop a great reputation among your colleagues. They are so powerful. But let me add a 4th piece of advice. No matter what your job is, become more aware of what colleagues and clients might need next. Always try to anticipate their needs. Think about how you can show initiative so you can add value to your colleagues and your employer. I have seen so many people, young and old, who simply aren't fully engaged. They aren't interested enough in what they're doing. Don't be one of those people. Caring about what your client, customer, or employer wants to achieve is incredibly important. Rightly or wrongly, Gen Z are often criticized for sharing certain behavior traits and mindsets, which can be at odds with what employers and clients want or demand from those who work for them. If you consistently behave in a number of the following ways, you might run a very real risk of being let go. Let me summarize them and offer some of my own thoughts. You at least need to know about them, even if you ultimately decide to disagree or ignore what I'm going to say before I offer practical ideas to help you thrive in the workplace. 1. Older employers complain that Gen Z tend to be poor when it comes to face-to-face communication and social skills. Digital messaging and communication can feel like it's the easier option. In many cases, it can lead to misunderstandings or even a lack of professionalism. High quality face-to-face communication helps you develop strong interpersonal skills, which in turn builds trust and a more collaborative working environment. 2. High expectations for flexibility and a work-life balance. You must realize that a job or a freelance assignment is always for the benefit of the end client. It does not exist for your convenience or to satisfy your curiosity or enjoyment. If your job does that, that's brilliant, but it's just a bonus. You're there to add value so your employer can make a profit. Traditional workplace practices and structures such as meeting client deadlines can't always accommodate comfort and well-being breaks. The work sometimes has to come first. If you're not happy in such an environment, resign and leave. Don't just disengage or go through the motions. If you do that, don't expect any promotions. I know a few young people who work for companies that work their people too hard. It does happen. But don't fall into the trap thinking that the grass is always greener and that things will be easier somewhere else. That's not necessarily true. And don't insist on an employer's flexibility, yet refuse to be flexible and adaptable for them. It's a two-way street. There are many more who will gladly take your place. 3. Reluctance to take direction. Some employers say that Gen Z employees don't respond well to supervision and feedback. Feedback is meant to be used to improve someone's performance and ultimately increase their value to the employer. Yes, it would be great to work in a collaborative environment where everyone is working together with no supervision for the common good of a project. But many established and successful businesses have clearly defined hierarchies and chains of command. They may feel restrictive to you and might even be outdated, but that's the way it is. The larger the organization, the more complex the systems and processes can be. It's really bad for your career if you're perceived as being unwilling to take direction or seen to challenge authority because they don't do things your way. If you struggle with that, let me give you another way of looking at it. Over the years, I've had PCs, Macs, Android and iPhones. For a long time, Apple used to drive me nuts because of the ways they used to force me to do things. One day, I was chatting to a fellow long-term Mac user, and he said something that changed my life. He simply said, "Stop fighting Apple. Just accept that that's how they do things." In an instant, I changed my mindset. I don't ever complain about Apple's quirks. Well, not out loud anyway. You can do the same if you're currently frustrated at the level of supervision and processes in your organization. 4. Job hopping and lack of long-term commitment. Gen Z is known for a tendency toward job hopping, often motivated by a desire to find more fulfilling or better paying roles as quickly as possible. Personally, I think job hopping is to be encouraged if it truly broadens your work experience, rather than merely thinking you'll have it easier or better somewhere else. Employers sometimes want long-term commitment, but they need to earn your loyalty. In cases where your commitment isn't high, some employers may choose to let you go rather than invest in your longer-term development. 5. Discomfort with entry-level tasks. Now, I've been told this one by a lot of managers and business owners who employ young people. Some members of Gen Z have high aspirations and are unwilling to do routine or entry-level tasks. They decide it's either demeaning or will slow their career progression. But rarely stop to think that if they won't do those jobs, who else will? Their bosses, perhaps? It's a rite of passage. Everybody has had to do that. If you ever decide to become a freelancer or a startup entrepreneur, you will have to do everything for yourself anyway, because you probably won't be able to afford to pay anyone else, at least at the start. 6. Me, mental health and burnout. Now, what do I mean by that? Looking after your mental health is obviously incredibly important. As a group, Gen Z in particular are more vocal about their mental health than other generations. But I'm told by employers they often use that as a reason or an excuse to stop work more often, while those around them have learned to be more resilient and work until a task is completed to meet deadlines. However, some young employees can experience burnout or mental health challenges that affect their productivity or reliability precisely because they haven't learned those resilience and perseverance skills. Some companies simply can't or won't accommodate people who don't have enough stamina for the job. Without adequate support systems, they may decide to let you go rather than accommodate those needs. I accept that it's far more complex than this. I have a video about managing your stress, so please check that one out. 7. Differences in work ethic and perceptions of professionalism. The definition of professionalism can vary between generations. You might prioritize authenticity, individuality, and informality. In some corporate environments, that might be perceived as being unprofessional. For example, are there set times when everybody stops for coffee or lunch? You need to be aware of the differences. If that's not something you're prepared to compromise on, you might be at the wrong company. That's why it's probably best to find out things like this before you join. 8. Misalignment with corporate culture. This is a big one. Does your employer share your personal vision, purpose, and values? For example, do they have your shared approach to ethnicity and gender diversity, environmental issues, or social responsibility? A groundbreaking 2002 book called The Corporation defined many global corporations as possessing the same character traits as those of a psychopath. It presents a compelling argument. How would you feel working for such an organization if it meant selling your soul to the devil? 9. Technology overdependency. You might be highly tech savvy, but do you struggle with in-person tasks or hands-on work, especially if you've been accustomed to remote or digital environments? Or an insistence on using technology instead of interacting with real people can sometimes be a liability in jobs that require a significant amount of in-person interaction or practical skills. 10. Insisting on immediate results. Call it ambition, enthusiasm, or it could be impatience on your part. Do you expect instant results and rapid career progression? This could be a problem for you in organizations that are slower to move than you prefer. You need to develop patience. As preparation for this video, I asked a few of my friends and colleagues in the video and conference industry who employ young people. I'll share a few real life examples of what those employers told me in a minute. In those industries, the competition for work is intense and most people are freelance. I've been full-time freelance for about 47 years. I'm going to make some videos here specifically about how to be a more successful freelancer. But whether you're employed or freelance, you really need to hear what I'm going to share with you. You might not like all of it, but if you're ambitious and want to have a successful career as an employee or as a self-employed freelancer, you absolutely must understand this. I'm not being melodramatic when I say this, but if you take on board what I talk about in this video, it really does have the power to change your life for your entire career. You will stand out as a high caliber professional. Future opportunities will come to you. Firstly, every business exists to make a profit. No profit for a prolonged period and the business folds. It's that simple. This is where most inexperienced workers go wrong. They incorrectly believe that they're just paid to carry out tasks or complete assignments. No, Regardless of what you think you're paid for, you're actually paid to help deliver the result your client or customer is paying for. And it's the job of the business owner to deliver the best possible result for his or her customers as efficiently and at the lowest cost possible, so they can make a profit and stay in business. At its most basic level, you as an employee or a freelancer are there as part of a team who work together in order to deliver those results for your organization's customers. You must learn to become more aware of what those results are. Ask if necessary, don't just guess. So business owners or clients hire people with skills they don't have. Some skills are valuable and people are prepared to pay more money for them, while other tasks can be done by lower paid workers. To be successful, you need to develop high-level skills that people will pay good money for, and preferably skills that can't be replaced easily by technology, especially artificial intelligence. Great if you love what you do and you're paid well, but if that's not the case, you can use the money you do earn to do more of what you love doing, either as a hobby or as a money-making side hustle. That will be the subject of other videos. For most of my own career, I've worked in radio and television and the events industry, hosting massive international congresses to audiences of many thousands. The people I work with are mostly freelance. Freelancers are only ever as good as their last jobs. Their reputation for being easy to work with and reliable are absolutely critical for your career success. One of my colleagues told me about an international event she was producing and shared a number of horror stories working with young people who she said just didn't get it. In my industry, the hours can be very long, at inconvenient times with insane deadlines that must be met. The work requires complex teamwork by highly skilled specialists. Most of that work has to be completed before the event starts. Then, during the event, every team member must be totally focused on delivering the best possible result for the client, with no excuses. It's highly stressful for the organizers. They have to depend on their teams. My friend told me about a young guy who she'd hired as a freelancer. They were staying abroad in a 5-star hotel. On the morning of the event, the freelancer was missing. He eventually showed up. He apologized, but that was no help. He explained that he'd cut his hand very badly during the night. He was asked how that had happened. He then admitted he'd raided the free minibar in his room and got so drunk he fell over and cut himself on a broken glass. Now, he was almost bragging when he told her that he was so hungover, which is why he was late. She told me in that moment she vowed she would never hire him again. What do you think about that? Was she right to make that decision? I totally agree with her. Let me explain why. He behaved unprofessionally. He was there to work, to be part of a team. Showing up late for whatever reason is totally unacceptable and has a negative impact on the ability of the rest of the team to do their work. Others depended on him. He failed them. By doing so, he increased the stress of his client, my friend, at the worst possible time, just before the event was due to start, when she had so many other things to worry about. Your job is always to reduce your manager or boss's stress, never to increase it. Your client or boss must be able to rely on you to be reliable at all times and to be there doing what you're paid for. Always. And on top of all of that, she would now have to create an accident report to comply with health and safety regulations. On top of that, he was stupid not to realize that someone always has to pay for the free stuff, in this case, the minibar. Every experienced worker who has to stay in hotels knows that you never use the minibar and expect the client to pay. You pay for that luxury out of your own money. One more example from another colleague, which, if I'm honest, shocked me. I couldn't believe this happened. He runs a small video production agency. He'd hired a young freelancer to do a job that, based on his experience, would take about 4 to 6 hours, and that's what he budgeted for. He was shocked and furious when he received her invoice for 90 hours. That's 90 hours. He called her immediately and was told matter-of-factly that she had to take a course to learn the software and then had to become familiar with it before she was able to complete the assignment. And that took 90 hours altogether. What are your thoughts on that? He, though, was very blunt with her and said, "You told me you could do this job. I'm not paying you to learn how to do it." She refused to accept his way of thinking. She didn't get paid, and he will never hire her again for anything. Let me share this golden rule. Never surprise or shock a client with expenses or costs they weren't expecting or had budgeted for, because ultimately they would have to pass that on to their customer or client or absorb it, which reduces their profit. This can't be overstated. You must be reliable. Your job is to make your boss's lives easier. They must be able to rely on you. If you're unreliable, you can't possibly make their lives easier. Practice this behavior with your family and friends to make it part of who you are. Your boss must feel that they can count on you. In many situations, you may be part of a bigger project that relies on each person doing the right thing, doing it accurately, and doing it on time. Someone unreliable can cause all sorts of problems, which can be irritating or very costly for an employer. But as someone new to the world of work, you can make such a positive impact, and so easily, if you learn from the following approach. Elliot was 20 when I spoke to him, and he told me this true story. He said, "When I was 16, my dad kept telling me that I should get a Saturday job. I didn't want to listen. He'd introduced me to a guy who seemed to like me. He was the manager of a local computer shop, and eventually my dad persuaded him to give me my first job interview. I was rubbish," he said. "Looking back, I had no idea. I wouldn't have given me the job, but I got it anyway. I helped customers with their problems, got things to work for them, and sometimes mended stuff. It forced me to talk to people. I felt really awkward at first, but pushed myself. It was a pain to have to get up early every Saturday, but after a while I got used to it. Not only that, after about 6 months, the manager called him into the office. He said I was petrified. He sat me down and offered me a pay rise. I hadn't even asked. He told me how impressed he'd been with the way I dealt with customers. He valued knowing that I always showed up for work on time, and he really appreciated it. If there was a problem I knew I couldn't handle, I'd ask him for help. That job really helped me." And quite recently, I had a 3-week assignment working with a guy who was my age, who had to shadow me. Even though I tried to get him to ask me questions, he didn't say a word. All he did was sit there using his hand to prop up his head on the desk. He was totally uninterested. He just didn't get it. In that moment, I realized how much I'd learned from my first job. I didn't want to believe it at the time, but learning the discipline of working was the absolute best advice I could have had from my dad. I have a lot to thank him for. I hope you can see from the examples I've given in this video that so much of being more valuable in the workplace is about making it a personal priority to develop a professional attitude towards work. I really hope this video has given you some helpful insights into what is expected of you in the workplace. Realize this, there is always work that needs to be done, and there are people who are prepared to pay good money for the right person to do that work. If you want to be that right person, please absorb the ideas I've been sharing here, and remember to like, subscribe and share this video. It helps the channel to grow and encourages me to make more videos. Thank you.